Welcome to the Sports Trading Card Hall of Fame. Today I'm going to be elevating Tallboys to the Binder of Fame. Now, Tallboys are about the most fun cards that have ever been created. I mean, if you asked a kid how they would change a card, a good answer would be to say, it's going to be like a normal card, but taller. Yeah, that's about some of it. That's all you need to do. Because when you do that, what you've basically done is you've created a different distribution of real estate. I mean, a tall boy is a third again as tall as a normal card, but it's almost a 2-to-1 ratio, which means that now the whole way that you think about a card is just flat out different. You look back at 1964 when they made their first set for hockey, and what they did was they had a really big portrait of the player, and then a big field up above with the team name floating in it like a halo. And it was perfect. And it does all the things you need to do. You feel tight and close in with the shot of the player, almost like a portrait card. And yet there's something really magical about the text way up there above his head. It was so good that in 1965, when they made their football card set, they did the exact same thing. They literally changed nothing except instead of having the team name, they had the town name. Basically, that was about it. But that's an interesting thing for Topps, because Topps always used different card designs for different sports. All the way up until 1990, when for the first time they took two Bowman sets. They had the baseball set and the hockey set, and they were the same design. And then, of course, in 1991, they did everything across all four sports. Well, all three sports at that point, which is a tradition they would do from that point on for 2 years. And then in 1994, they get back to doing different card designs for different sports. So, it was a brief period, but that was the thing, is that in 1964 with hockey and 65 with football, they used the same card design, and they even had baseball in between, and they didn't bother with using the same card design because they weren't using the same proportions. But it's not that it's constrained to the proportions, because in 1969, when they made their first basketball set of their second run at basketball, they used the same proportions, but the card design is wildly different. Although, the year following that, 1971, also Tallboy, here's a card that is a lot more in the same spirit as the 1960s cards. So really, in Topps' entire history of making Tallboys, they only had one card design that was actually different from the others. And it's a shame that they didn't explore it more. They didn't have more opportunity to work with it, because I get why they didn't continue with it. The card has two big things going against it. One, it's awkward to use. It doesn't fit in your hand. The way that it moves, there's this top-heavy quality to it that's kind of weird. It kind of tends to stick together a little bit more because it has more real estate between the two cards. And obviously quality control issues can be there because the extra length makes it a little bit more prone to damage in the middle. And then the other issue is the fact that, how do you even store it? I mean, nowadays we have card pages, and you can get top loaders, and you can get penny sleeves, but I mean, at the time you couldn't do that. But even today, try storing it in a card box. Card boxes aren't designed for Tallboys. Some are, but it's tough to find those, which means that it doesn't fit in with the rest of their collection. I mean, right now, all of my hockey cards for the Sports Card Professor channel, I've got all those cards stacked up, and there's one card set for Parkhurst that is oversized, that sticks out from the rest of them, and it's really, I mean, it's kind of dangerous for the cards because they're so exposed. That's a big part of the problem with these card sets, and that's why there have been so few card sets made. I mean, in the entire history of Tallboys, there have only been 14 main card sets created, and then, of course, some insert sets and a smattering of extra cards. And yet, having said that, 14 card sets is a lot. I mean, think of how many card sets were created for the gridiron size card set. Not a lot. Well, what about the 8x10s? Not a lot. What about the old Topps design card size? Very few. Even the old Bowman card designs, where they did both football and they did baseball, they still didn't have as many cards that were made with that old 1950s Bowman size as Tallboys in the entire history. 14 is actually a lot, which means that setting aside tobacco cards, that means that Tallboys are the second most prolific card dimension for main set cards, at least in the 20th century, and even today I think it still is the case. So that's saying a lot about the unique proportions and how intriguing they are. Because Topps only made 4 sets. They made the 64 hockey set, the 65 football set, the 69 and the 70 basketball card set. And a few years later in the 70s, they would make an oversized card that was not a Tallboy. But that was the history of Topps making Tallboys. And then there was that one card in 1996. That was it. So because Topps didn't bother to continue with it, it basically would have been the end of Tallboys, except there was an attempt in 1992 to bring back that historic size with Game Day. And this was an attempt to bring back some history that wasn't baseball. And I mean, quite literally, it was every sport but baseball that had Tallboys. But the Game Day cards, unfortunately, the 1992 set was not well done because it was an overly large set that was boring. There were no subsets. The design was pretty lackluster. There were no inserts. It wasn't well thought out. It was trying to capture a tradition that never really existed in the cards. And so thankfully, the next year, 1993, Fleer would take over and they would immediately spice up the card with color. Fleer made a number of changes to the cards that made them a lot better, and then when they moved over to hockey, it worked so well. When they went over to basketball for their jam session cards, they got rid of most of the borders, which they continued with baseball and with football, and then by the time they got to basketball again, I think it's still technically a 3/4 bleed, but now the card feels even more like a run-on sentence. And then, well, they didn't continue with hockey or football or baseball. And in 1995, unfortunately, the swan song of Jam Session was not a highlight. It was a real low point, almost like they were trying to kill the brand or let us off easy, something like that. I don't know. It was a bad card design. I even like the classic cards that they did in the Tallboys. Now, the Parkhurst cards are awesome because of the fact that they bring back the 1960s and they give you the feeling of if Parkhurst did a Tallboy set along with Topps, this is what the Parkhurst set would be like. And again, it looks really good. It's just having that extra real estate gives you the ability to have a lot more fun with the cards because you got more room for the background to play around with, to stretch things out. It's great. And when you look at the, whether it is the Game Day cards or the extra base cards, when you do the full bleed cards, the full bleed can read a lot better because you're in closer to the player. He's taking up more of the space, so you're paying attention to him better. Whereas with the normal size cards, it's a lot easier for him to get lost in the background. So the Game Day cards, it is a shame that we just didn't get any more. But it gives us a really fascinating part of two different histories of cards. You have the classic 1960s into the 1970s era, where you have that feeling of Indiana Jones discovery, getting to those old cards. And then you get to the very modern 1990s, and you look at the jam session cards, and a whole new generation of card designers are playing around with it in a very different way. The inserts get to be a lot of fun. It really is a cool tradition that we were able to see in two distinct periods. But it is two distinct periods. And that's really the problem, which is that even when they brought it back, Fleer brought back Gaudy size cards at one point for 1.5 years period. Bringing back these old cards is a great gift that we get for a brief period of time. But unlike the old Bowman size and the old Topps size and the old Gaudy size, Tallboys are different. They just capture the imagination in a very special way. And that's why this is the first card size that I talked about in the Stories of Cardboard, and it's the first one that I'm inducting here into the Binder of Fame. And I still haven't talked about any other card sizes because there's no reason to at this point. That's how distinct Tallboys are. They're that one card that stands out and says, this is special. And it really has continued to inspire us over the years. So, here we have it. Inducted into the Binder of Fame. And very, very, very well deserved. So, with that bringing this all to a close, I want to say that if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Check out the other stories of cardboard that I do, the other inductions, do all of the things that I've been talking about with the history of sports cards. Definitely check out all of that stuff. And, well, yeah, thank you very much for watching.